Good afternoon and welcome to The Appeal Live, a co-production of Now This and The Appeal. I'm Emily Galvin Almanza. So in December of 2019, a few days before Christmas, 40-year-old Anya Wine, alone in her jail cell at the Travis County Correctional Complex outside Austin, Texas, died. Wine had been booked into jail 4 days earlier. She was following a fight with her family that had led to her arrest, and she was quickly processed with a self-inflicted wound. She was initially housed on suicide watch, but she was quickly moved to the medical housing unit where authorities say she ultimately died by suicide. Hundreds of stories like this one play out in jails across America each year. Jails are dangerous, and a disproportionate percentage of the overall jail population is made up of folks who are engaged or struggling with mental illness or substance use and other challenges that make being in a neglectful, harmful place even more difficult. Although we don't have comprehensive data on the total number of people who die by suicide in jails each year, reporting suggests that it is, in fact, a leading cause of death behind bars. In other words, not only can you not get well in a cell, but for many people, being in a cell can be deadly. All of this brings us back to the Travis County Correctional Complex, where Anya Wine died in 2019. Officials in Travis County are currently moving forward with a plan to build a new 350-bed women's jail at a cost of nearly $80 million. Law enforcement officials, including Travis County Sheriff Sally Hernandez, maintain that they need a new facility to provide better, more gender-specific care to incarcerated women. They've specifically cited plans to bring OBGYN services on site and implement new mental health programs tailored specifically toward women. But a jail is still a jail, no matter which words you use to describe it. And it's a sad fact that jails in America often do end up functioning as service providers for the most vulnerable. But that's also because many folks have no way to access treatment until they get incarcerated in America. But the truth, quite simply, is that a jail is never the best place for a woman to give birth or receive medical care or mental health care. In fact, a jail is usually the last place someone would want to do any of those things. By building a new facility, county officials are not only reinforcing the falsehood that jails can adequately fill these roles, they are telling an $80 million lie that will only lead to more incarceration, worse care, and further neglect of the underlying issues. Now, some people in Travis County have recognized the new jail for what it is and are calling on the county to redirect the huge investment into non-punitive approaches to social problems. In December, a group of local justice reform organizations called on the Travis County judge and commissioners to halt the new jail construction immediately, indefinitely, arguing that they should focus instead on, and I'll quote here from a letter they wrote, building alternative approaches to many of the primary drivers of local incarceration. The letter notes that jail bookings have been in steady decline since at least 2014, with recent reductions specifically in the number of women incarcerated. Last month, a group of gender and reproductive justice organizations in Travis County made the same request in another letter, arguing that building a new jail, and I'll quote again, will directly and disproportionately harm BIPOC communities, especially Black women. And that's by perpetuating a racist system of mass incarceration. The authors noted that incarcerated women face unique threats of violence, sexual abuse, harassment, and are subject to poor quality medical care, including preventative screenings, prenatal care, and other pregnancy-related services. The authors wrote, I'll quote again, another jail means more gendered and racialized violence. Another jail will not keep our community safe. It will dehumanize individuals and rip apart families. So for a closer look at the ongoing push to stop the new women's jail in Travis County, I'm so privileged to be joined by two women who have been on the front lines of the fight, Amanda Woog, Executive Director of the Texas Fair Defense Project, and Annette Price, Co-Executive Director of Grassroots Leadership. Thank you both so much for being here with me today.
Thank you.
So Amanda, I'd love for you to start by giving us like a quick status update. We're now more than 2 years removed from the commissioner's initial approval of the plan to build a new jail. Where does the jail stand now?
It's basically mired in bureaucracy at the moment. There were proposals put forward by people who would actually be contracted with to build the jail that were scrapped in the past year. And right now, people within the county are working through other proposals that they would then bring to the commissioner's court to approve the contract that would be put out. As you mentioned, we're talking about $80 million to build a new jail. So what we're really hoping is that we'll put a pause on the progress forward and take a step back and start thinking about how we can decarcerate in Travis County rather than build new jails that will then, as we know, ultimately be occupied. So we're kind of in this pause situation, and we're really hoping to start along a new path rather than continue to go down the one that the commissioners approved a couple years ago.
So how long is that pause going to last? Because it feels like you're sort of like in this eye of the storm moment where there could be then a cascade of like construction and groundbreaking. And how long before the timeline begins to move forward again?
I think it could be any week now. From what I understand, internally the county is working on these proposals, and we'll bring those to the commissioners. For us, the pause can and should last forever. It just shouldn't move past where we are right now. The proposal shouldn't even be in commissioner's court to be considering putting out a contract of this size to build a new jail. And like I said, what I really hope is that rather than moving forward on that path, we halt the plans entirely and we start a new path with the new elected officials that we have, a new district attorney, a new county attorney, and a new county judge who ran on platforms to decarcerate in our county. What I really hope is that with these newly elected officials, we'll create a new path to depopulating the jail rather than creating new beds that will ultimately be filled.
So Annette, I want to talk to you about something that one hears all the time when we get into these conversations about new jails, where people are like, but the old jail is gross and inhumane, and like, we're going to have a jail anyway, so shouldn't we have like a better jail that's more humane? And I know you have direct connections to this issue as someone who's experienced incarceration, so I'm hoping you could respond to that argument that like, there's going to be a jail anyway, why not have a better one?
Thank you, and thank you again for having me. No state-of-the-art jail is a place to put humans, because at the end of the day, it's still a cage. We're still caging humans. We're caging them because they have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, other traumatic issues that set them on that path for that. So no state-of-the-art jail or no cage is better for any human. So I'm totally against building this jail, despite what Commissioner Shade seems to think that I'm for this jail, but there's no cage that we should put any human beings in. And if those buildings are not being used, then they're not being used for a reason. The buildings going down, the count of women going into the jail, those days are going down. There's not as many women population in the jail anymore. So if the number of women are not being incarcerated, again, like Amanda said, because we have a new DA, that his platform is to reduce prison jail count. His platform is also to stop cash bail. Cash bail is one of the leading drivers for folks that's sitting in jail. So no state-of-the-art jail is going to be right for anyone.
Drill down on what you just said about cash bail, right? Because the jail is full of people who primarily have not been convicted of any crime, who are sitting there because they are too poor to buy their freedom from the county. And I'd like to have you give us some insight on how these problems manifest specifically in Travis County. I read a horrifying story from KUT about the poor medical care that some women are receiving in the jail, which is, of course, extremely terrifying during an historic pandemic and the COVID-19 outbreak. Can you speak to us about what medical care is like and the other sort of, I want to say quality of life, but it's more like ability to live problems that face women in these spaces?
There's not an ability to live. What it does is continue to perpetuate the problem and also increase trauma for these women. To be blunt, sometimes they don't get menstrual cycle pads. They don't get a decent change of clothing. They have to pay for any extra. They don't have any money to do that because they have to pay for the phone usage in the jail. Everything costs in the jail. So there's no way that they can dress it up and say, oh, we need this new jail so we can better serve the women, better help the women by having a medical facility there. That's not going to help the problem. They shouldn't be in jail in the first place. And second of all, they don't have the right equipment to handle even a pregnancy for a woman. So they shouldn't be in jail, period.
So Amanda, let's talk about the context that Annette just brought up, which is these new reform-minded candidates in the county. There's the new district attorney, Jose Garza. There's the new county attorney, Delia Garza. Can you talk about the platforms they ran on and how the new jail idea flies in the face of their promises?
Absolutely. And I think it goes beyond Jose and Delia as well. We've really seen a ground shift over the past 6 months to a year in Travis County with our approaches to the pandemic and to other social issues. And I think between the uprisings that we saw this summer, the decision by the Austin City Council to reimagine policing and reallocate funding from the police department to non-carceral solutions, plus Jose now being the district attorney who ran on a platform of ending cash bail, of ending prosecutions for low-level drug offenses. Hopefully we get him to end prosecutions of drug offenses altogether, but it's a really great start. And same with Delia Garza, the county attorney is in charge of prosecuting misdemeanors, and she's similarly made pledges to end the criminalization of poverty, and treating drug use as a criminal justice problem and have a public health approach to it. So in all of these ways, our county is just taking a very different approach from even 1 year ago to why we lock people up. And it's refreshing to see as an advocate. But honestly, it's disappointing to see that our county officials are kind of operating business as usual in trying to push forward with the jail. Due in large part to the pandemic, the women's jail population has decreased by 36% in the past year. And we can go even further. That's not even with the reforms that our county attorney and our district attorney have promised. I haven't even mentioned that we have a new public defender office that is going to be starting to do bail hearings at Travis County. No one currently has counsel at bail hearings. The changes that are happening right now are monumental, and they've just outpaced the thinking of our commissioner's court. I think our commissioner's court needs to start from ground zero and catch up with their colleagues. Yeah,
full disclosure, the new public defender, Adeola Ogunkeyede, my former colleague and good friend. So I'm obviously a big fan of what she's going to be able to do at bail hearings, which may be, as we all know, the most crucial moment in a case, right? When a person's ability to fight that case at home with their family, going to work, going to school, or be locked in a cage during the pendency of that case will be decided. But I want to drill down on something you just said about the women's incarcerated population dropping 36%, because I need you to I'm going to ask you to put yourself in the shoes of the county commissioners and explain to me where their heads are at, which maybe you cannot do. So if I hear the women's jail population just dropped 36%, more than a third drop, and we're instituting all these new measures with a progressive DA and a new public defender to drop that even further, it seems weird to me that the answer would be, let's drop $80 million on building a new facility for people who might not even be in jail versus let's get it to zero. Why doesn't the let's go to zero thought occur to them? Where is this conversation missing a link here? Can you break it down for me?
Well, I mean, I think their heads are in 2018, and their heads in 2018 were in 2015 and 2016. And what I mean is that in 2014, the county started on this master plan for correctional facilities. And just, think of where we were as a community, as a country in that time, and how much has changed when it comes to bail reform or confronting the horrors of mass incarceration. So we're kind of talking about a different time. So the county embarked on this planning. In 2016, they came up with this master plan for correctional facilities that included creating a new women's jail. So by 2018, the commissioner's court was kind of rubber stamping that plan that the sheriff has really been pushing the entire time. part of the problem is in 2016, that plan was based on the wrong assumptions, which were that the jail population would continue to increase. In 2018, when presented with evidence that the jail population has gone down, that was basically ignored in favor of creating beds based on jail populations that we were seeing years before. So when I say that our county commissioners haven't really caught up with this movement, I'm talking about over a long period of time, and not only the incredible movement that's happened over the past 6 months to a year. They've been behind in this whole process. And to be honest, I don't think have been engaging critically and creatively about how to turn away from the criminal justice system, right? And think about community-based solutions to, mental health issues and drug use and, a lot of the underlying issues that we see that plague our jail population. So they're just, you ask where their heads are, and
their heads are in 2016. Yeah, no, I think no matter where you stand on the spectrum, you could be the most carceral person in the world. You could be a regressive chief of police and probably still agree that public policymakers should base their huge expenditures on current numbers. And it seems like they're using the numbers from 2016. Annette, I want you to weigh in on the numbers for a minute here, because $80 million is a lot of money. $80 million can do a lot of things besides build a new jail. And assuming that the county commissioners are out of date on their calculus of what's necessary right now and where the money should go, I'd love for you to talk about where else $80 million could be spent. I'm guessing many of the organizations that might use that money aren't seeing a fraction of it right now. So I'd love for you to weigh in on alternatives.
Oh, absolutely. I would start with, because we pushed so hard to establish the first public defender's office here in Travis County, a huge chunk of that money, because it's so heavily underfunded, I think a huge chunk of that money should go in support of the public defender's office to make sure that it is holistic and they have all the wraparound services that they will need to help individuals. Just like Dallas and Harris County have dedicated significant resources for universal representation of immigrants, with Travis County lags behind. So people are getting deported in a mass rate of numbers in Travis County. So money could go to support the public defender's office so we can have what we need. Money should also be funded to utilize like reentry programs, including rental house research assistance, provide employment assistance, assistance to help them get in a birth certificate, a social security card, normal things that folks already have. When you're coming out of jail, you don't have those kind of resources. So those things will be crucially important to get established here. Also, another thing I think they should spend money on is giving harm reduction money. Harm reduction is a new coalition that's helping people with substance abuse. They're underfunded. Money could be going there. Community-based healthcare centers, trauma-informed care, money could go there. There's a gazillion different places I can rattle off of where this money should go, but basically it should go back into the community. Our community is suffering at large, and to just throw $80 million on a design of a state-of-the-art jail is useless, because we're still locking people up for a public health problem when we can utilize this funding to help them on the front end, and then they won't continue on their cycle of going to jail on a regular basis.
Upstreaming that funding so it prevents the need for that jail in the first place. That leads me to the last thing. We're coming to the end of our time, but it leads me to the last thing I wanted to raise, which nobody has directly said, but I think we have to talk about this for folks who are new to this issue. The old chestnut, if you build it, they will fill it. The concept, of course, is that jail beds can be viewed in terms of supply and demand. And if the county spends a lot of money creating a larger supply of jail beds, law enforcement will be incentivized to fill the demand, which means putting more people in the jail and moving away from what sounds like a number of very promising recent changes designed to diminish the number of people who need those beds. I'd like to start with Amanda and then go to Annette to talk a little bit about how the thinking if they build it, they will fill it, is guiding the justice reform movement in Travis County and elsewhere. Amanda, we'll start with you and then go to Annette.
Yeah, and what you say is absolutely right, Emily. And I think the kind of inverse is true as well, which is if you reduce the number of beds, then you will reduce the number of people coming into the jail. And it sounds really obvious, but in some ways it also forces those more upstream approaches when you just don't have those beds available. So I think you're absolutely right. And it's not just about, what else could we do with this $80 million, which is a really important question. But it is about where and how do we want to treat people? Do we want to treat our neighbors? And if we put those beds, if we put those resources in a jail, that's how we're going to treat our neighbors, who need assistance. If we put those resources, including OBGYN resources, all the ones that you rattled off in the beginning that would be in this shiny new jail, if we put those resources in the community, that's where they're going to be used. So it is very much a question of the place, that we put these. And I completely agree with Annette. We don't want availability of resources to be contingent upon taking away someone's freedom and having them caged in a jail. One thing we haven't touched upon that I just want to highlight really quick too is this is a family separation issue, especially when we're talking about women who are in jail. Nationally, 80% of women who are incarcerated are mothers. The KUT article that you saw, Emily, highlights the story of a woman who has 2 young children who's in on 2 drug offenses and a nonviolent robbery offense. Why are you separating this woman from her children during a deadly pandemic? So if you create those beds, we're going to put people in them. If you put the resources somewhere else in the community, then our neighbors will be able to use them without the threat of coercion, violence, and family separation that is inherent in jails.
Yeah, I think, Annette, as we go to you, I'd love for you to pick up on what Amanda just said, because we really haven't talked about, for every woman in that jail, there is a family who is also harmed by every day she spends in there. And I'd love for you to close us out talking about the ripples of harm that come from every jail bed.
When he said that, it came to mind recently, Miss Rose James was released after serving 18 years in prison, right, for a crime that she did not commit. So I went to prison when I was 20 years old. I had a son at the time, and I was pregnant with my daughter. So I could compare our 2 lives. Very similar results is going to happen, right? Because they cannot get those 18 years back that she's missed raising her kids. Her kids will not understand that the mother before she went to jail, they only know the mom here. So all the childbearing years, they both have been robbed of by her being sitting in jail for 18 years or sitting in prison for 18 years. When a female goes to jail and they have a kid, right, they run the risk of CPS coming and taking their child from them. They don't know where their child was placed at the time that the police arrested them. Everything stopped as a parent for them at that moment of arrest. So they don't know where their child is that night, who has their child. Again, CPS can come in and take those children from them. I think incarcerating parents is the worst thing we can do, because we're also setting up the school to prison pipeline for children when we send women to jail. What we need to do, again, is have better programs established. And I want to say to those that, with your question, if you build it, we'll fill it. And that's because prisons was designed to do exactly what they were supposed to do, and that was to incarcerate marginalized Black and brown people. And if we continue to have that mindset that locking people up is the answer, then we have the wrong people in place of offices today, because that's not the answer. Again, it goes back to looking at what happened in their early stages of life and childhood that causes those trauma. When a mom goes to jail, you are inflicting trauma on that child that child cannot get back. He has to have years, or she has years of upbringing without their parent. It's not the same being nurtured by an aunt or a grandma or, your cousins opposed to that nurturing love from a mom. And that's something that I will never be able to get back, being incarcerated for 20 years. And that's also something that Rose will never be able to get back. And not only that, how did we set her up for success when she was released? The first thing, ICE want to come back and put her into custody. That's not fair. That started another set of trauma that her and her kids have to go through. At some point in time, we have to realize and get those that are policymakers and city council members that are decision makers to understand that we as community members are causing more harm by incarcerating people and separating them from our mom. And if those people are continuing to want to shepherd to push the jail because they have something at stake, then those are the people that we need to remove from office, because we have to stop inflicting undoing harm on people in the United States.
Annette, thank you so much for that. You put me in mind of Keely Shenwar, who died a year ago today, and who wrote incredibly powerfully about her own experience giving birth inside, in custody. And I feel like any elected official who wants to weigh in on this should have to read a firsthand account of a mother's experience behind bars before they decide to construct a new jail. So thank you for that. And thank you both so much for joining us. It's been an absolute honor speaking with you both about this issue. And I hope you'll come back and visit us again soon on the Appeal Live.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
So there you have it. Despite all of these intelligent, nuanced, intuitive human arguments from advocates like Amanda and Annette, commissioners in Travis County, Texas are holding firm to their plans to build this $80 million new jail. While Sheriff Sally Hernandez and other law enforcement officials have done their very best to dress this up as a humane move that's looking out for the interests of incarcerated women, we've heard now from a woman who's been incarcerated who says this is not the answer. A jail is still a jail. No matter what sort of fancy bells and whistles and catchphrases you attach to it, it's still a cage. If you invest money in the infrastructure of incarceration, you can be sure that the county will use that infrastructure. If you build it, they will fill it. If you create a supply, there must be the demand to make that $80 million expenditure worthwhile, which in this case, as we just heard, would mean more women in jail, more mothers in jail, more families separated, more newborns taken from their mother's arms, and more kids put in placements where they may not be reunited with their parent. It seems really like an understatement to say this is a rigid and outdated mindset. It is perhaps a mindset of not fully engaging with the humanity and the human impact of the decisions these policymakers are going to make. Mountains of research and lived experience show us that incarceration is not, in fact, the best way to heal social ills, to deal with social problems. Some of the upstream solutions that Annette and Amanda mentioned have, in fact, been shown to be much more effective at stopping harm before it happens than perpetuating trauma and deprivation and repeating the isolation and incapacitation and harm that a cage inflicts on a human being. There are proven alternatives that can address this. And honestly, it's not that places like Travis County, Texas, the city of Austin, don't have the funds to do it. $79 or $80 million is a lot of money that could go a long way. The problem is that the county commissioners are, on the basis of, as we heard from Amanda, outdated data, choosing to spend a huge amount of money on a jail for which there is rapidly diminishing demand, the women's jail population being down more than a third, new policies in place to prevent more women from going into cages. They're still using the old mindset. They're rubber stamping the old plan to let this plan go forward. And the problem then is that county commissioners are perhaps thoughtlessly choosing to spend this money feeding mass incarceration rather than investing in a supportive system that could make incarceration less necessary. You brought that jail population down 36%. Let's go to 0. So you can stay on top of all the latest news on this and on many other subjects of interest here at the Appeal Live. Thanks for spending some time with me. I'm Emily Galvin Almanza. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, we look forward to seeing you again soon. Even back this afternoon, I'm going to be back at 4 o'clock. So I hope 4 o'clock Eastern. So I hope you'll join me then. Thanks so much.